In conjunction with my earlier soft versus hard targeting video, I think it's important to understand this targeting tab in the keybinds. There are a number of ways to actually target things, and each function may be useful or completely worthless based on your playstyle. At the top of the list, we have the default method, tab cycling. This can go forward, left or right, or backward. One pro of tab cycling is having complete control of who you target because of its cycling nature. With enough button pushes, you will get to the enemy you want. Another pro is that because it's the default, many players will automatically be accustomed to it from early play. However, there are some cons too. Because an enemy may be, say, fourth in line, it could take 4 pushes to get there. Pressing slowly will eat up the time you want to do something, and pressing quickly could lead to overpressing. There are also 2 types of tab cycling if you look at this option, ignore depth and cone. Ignore depth will find any enemy on the screen, even far off ones so long as their name is displayed, and cycle through them. It's the most surefire way of making sure nothing gets missed, but it can be annoying and impractical at times. However, within dungeons this is far less likely to be an issue. One thing to note though is that when nothing is selected, it looks for the nearest first. If you're not aware of that, it can cause some confusion. This is also why when the tank uses tab target on a new pack, I always target the same enemy with my nearest enemy keybind. Cone targeting is just weird. According to Morning, a great resource for breaking down Final Fantasy XIV concepts, it searches for the next enemy in a pattern of cone shapes after a small radius for a close enemy. This simplifies down to searching for the nearest, then next nearest frontal enemy. This can often give unexpected results, such as choosing enemies in seemingly random ways and enemies on the sides being completely ignored. There are some other options for targeting specific enemies, but none of them have the flexibility of tab cycling. That doesn't mean tab cycling is the best, though. Options like target last enemy and target enemy attacking you are essentially useless. Target of current target has some particular uses such as when healing or in PvP. However, my personal favorite method of targeting enemies is to bind tab to target nearest enemy. One big pro of the nearest enemy method is that simply standing near an enemy guarantees quick targeting, and moving slightly to another grouped enemy changes guaranteed target. Pressing tab again on accident will not change your target, and using this will ensure the fastest use of abilities and spells when range is a factor. Things that are neither pros nor cons but are important to note are 1. That you will be able to select the only enemy or boss on screen just as easily as you do with tab cycling, and 2. In neither mode can you select an enemy that is off screen. The only real con is lack of maximized control, where your targeting relies on your position rather than a cycle. However, in situations with multiple enemies, unless they're ranged, they'll swarm you, solving this problem. With only one enemy, it's a non-issue. When new enemies appear on screen, nearest enemy does have a harder time than cycling, which is why I prefer to supplement the nearest enemy with this option, cycle through Enmity list. I've mentioned before that I cycle the Enmity list with my mouse wheel, and this has been wonderful. For new enemies, simply pop the wheel. Once all the enemies are engaged, if you have one you're not near but need to target, pop the wheel. Want to ensure damage over time is on each enemy? Pop the wheel. You can't set that in the keybind menu, but you can activate it through this targeting submenu in character configuration. Enmity scrolling is handy for both tab cycling and nearest enemy targeting, but I think it's a slam dunk in combination with nearest enemy, which I found to be superior for all the content I've run, including PvP. Targeting a party member by hotkey is something that seems like it would be handy at first, but in my experience doesn't actually have that much value. Whether you use mouse over macros like me or not, it's very easy to click on a party member's name if the party list is accessible. If it's not accessible, you're probably not looking at it much to see when something is needed anyway. The first few people, depending on your party sorting, could be the exception, such as tanks and healers for quick access. But I find that you have to use a little brain power to figure out, oh, is this 4 or 5? Maybe is this 6? And it's just not as quick as I would like. My personal recommendation is to keep hotkeys for maybe up to party member 3, and then put F4 to F8 to better use. Targeting your pet isn't necessary for any high pressure situations, and this keybind can be removed. You only target your pet to use an emote or send it away anyway, and that can be done with a right click. And your companion gets a party slot, so anything you need to do to it can be done easily. I have never once found it useful to target specific alliance members or cycle the alliance list. Crystalline conflict hotkeys are a nice inclusion for those who specifically run CC and no one else. And even then, there are other ways of marking and targeting specific members. I covered the basics of focus targeting in another video, and many commenters explained how they like to use it. Check that, and I won't need to go into any more detail. This most obscure face target keybind should be completely useless, because you should always, unless you're running first-person content like I am, have auto face target checked. In fact, if it's off, you're going to think your game is broken as you stand directly on an enemy and can't use any attacks. This caught me so off guard twice that I'm going to make a short about it. Lastly, there are options here to set your current targeting mode. However, if you set your filters correctly, or your keybinds, or you use a mouse, then this shouldn't need a keybind. So to sum up the important things, the only two viable options for selecting enemies are tab cycling and target nearest enemy. No other method has the ability to change targets with any reasonable accuracy, and clicking enemies is unreliable with HUD elements and mob clusters. I prefer nearest enemy. That's not to say that there aren't useful options here, but they're limited to specific situations. Furthermore, Enmity scrolling can improve your targeting by a lot, especially if you use the mouse wheel. So tell me how you like to target, but know that if you say I click on the enemies, I will haunt your dreams.